The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has had a substantial impact on American politics and could shape the Biden administration's approach to foreign affairs. A recent Washington Post article examined the ties between the Black Lives Matter movement and Palestinians and what all this means for the Democratic Party. So Sean Sullivan is the co-author of that piece and is here with me now. He is a CBS News political contributor and a White House reporter for the Washington Post. Thanks for joining us, Sean. The article was definitely very interesting. I think that a lot of people are going to hear Black Lives Matter and they're going to associate it with clearly only domestic issues, but very specifically issues relating to race and policing. But if you know anything about Black Lives Matter, it's much broader than that. It's about Black Lives Matter in education and healthcare. But then I think this, in all aspects of Black lives. But then I think this summer we saw something really interesting around the world as people took to the streets to protest police brutality. They were saying Black Lives Matter too, and I realized at the time, this isn't strictly an American thing. They're feeling a kinship as well, and they're protesting as well. And now we see that almost sort of take another step when we talk about international. What correlation do Black Lives Matter activists see between their movement in the U.S. and the struggles facing Palestinians?
Well, yes, it does look like this is another step in the extension of the reach of the Black Lives Matter movement, not just in domestic issues, but in the international arena. And one of the things we've seen here in this country is how powerful, how influential Black Lives Matter has become in the Democratic Party. It wasn't always that way. As recently as a few years ago, you didn't see every Democratic politician, every Democratic lawmaker embrace the movement the way you see it now. But now that we're undergoing this national reckoning on race, on police violence, you see virtually every Democrat, from President Biden down to local city councilors, embracing the movement. And so it's given Black Lives Matter a new prominence, a new power, a new influence in the Democratic Party. And now they're trying to use that influence to shape the debate over what we're seeing in the Middle East. For many years, Black Lives Matter has championed Palestinians, has talked about the situation in the Middle East, has been very, very critical of the Israeli government. And we're seeing that, conversation happen in a more prominent way now in the United States because you have, activists becoming more prominent. For example, you have Congresswoman Cori Bush from Missouri, who was a Black Lives Matter organizer and activist before she joined Congress. Well, she recently gave a speech on the House floor talking about what happened in Ferguson, the protests that she participated in, drawing a direct parallel between that and the situation in the Middle East. And what we're seeing is Black Lives Matter activists like Congresswoman Bush sort of try to reframe the debate over what's happening in the Middle East in a way that, it is not just about geopolitics, it's not just about this long-running dispute, but they're framing it in terms of the police, in terms of race, in terms of police violence. And that's an issue that's been at the forefront of the American discussion here over the last year or so. And so it's sort of changing the terms of the debate. There's no doubt we're seeing a shift in the way the Democratic Party talks about the dispute in the Middle East. We've seen Democrats adopt a harder line over time toward Israel, toward the Israeli government. And so Black Lives Matter and the speeches we're hearing from them, the statements we're hearing from them, that's one of the factors that is pushing the Democratic Party in a new direction. But while that's happening, not every Democrat embraces what they are doing. We've heard from some Democrats who take the opposing view, who say, look, you should not be equating the racial reckoning we see in the United States with what we're seeing abroad. That is a very, very difficult, different thing, they say. That's a very complicated circumstance. So it's a messy dispute right now in the Democratic Party because you don't have everybody marching in lockstep. But clearly, this is a development that we didn't see a few years ago and in past disputes in the Middle East. And now it's sort of changing the terms of the debate, forcing members of Congress, the White House, activists to confront these issues in a new way.
I think it's fascinating. You know, here you have the Democratic Party embracing Black Lives Matter, the movement, and everything that it represents. And as the movement starts to expand, then the Democratic Party finds itself in a situation as to whether or not they are embracing all that Black Lives Matter stands for. And so I want to ask you about President Biden, who at times has really found himself kind of in the middle, being sort of nudged in different directions depending on, you know, what the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party is saying versus, you know, maybe a place where he's a little more comfortable in the center. So how has he responded to this? What are you seeing with the way President Biden is reacting to these pressures?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Anne-Marie. He has tried to strike a careful balance on a lot of issues where he's sort of caught in between the liberal wing of his party and the more mainstream centrist wing. You know, as a whole, there's no doubt that we've seen President Biden align himself with the cause in general that Black Lives Matter stands for. But when it comes to Middle East policy, when it comes to the recent conflict that we just saw, we haven't seen him adopt the rhetoric that a lot of Black Lives Matter activists are using. They've been very, very critical of the Israeli government, very, very critical of Israel. We haven't seen President Biden take that line. He's taken a more traditional line. He's been very, very supportive of Israel. He's been supportive of Israel's right to defend himself. That's language we've seen him use over and over again throughout the recent conflict. And so we haven't seen him move, you know, to the place where a lot of Black Lives Matter activists are right now. We do see, as we talked about earlier, sort of a broader shift in the Democratic Party on Middle East policy. Even, you know, sort of longtime members who have been staunch allies of Israel have been willing to be a little bit more critical of the Israeli government. And even when we look at President Biden's rhetoric over time as the recent conflict unfolded, we did see even he was a little bit more critical publicly of the Israeli government, put a little bit more pressure on them to tamp down some of their military efforts. But we haven't seen him go to a place where Black Lives Matter is right now in terms of the language that they are using. And so this is going to be part of a debate, no doubt, that we'll see in the coming months and years ahead. How does this movement that has become really, really prominent in the Democratic Party, you know, affect what President Biden is saying, what he's doing? Because a lot of people look to him and his words, not just his actions, but his word choice, how to talk about these issues, how to talk about these debates. So we'll see how this plays out over time. But right now, they're definitely not in exact alignment on this, to say the least.
Yeah, fascinating article, Sean. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.